This episode of the only podcast about movies deals with sensitive topics, including the serious allegations of sexual abuse by Michael Jackson. Therefore, if you feel discussion of this subject might be triggering for you, please feel free to skip this one. Also, if you or someone you know has been affected by sexual abuse, the National Sexual Abuse Hotline can be contacted at 1-800-656-4673 or by visiting www.rainn.org. And now, on to the episode. What is up, Internet? Oh my God, how lucky are we? My name is Matthew Kroll.
And what you think would be standard instincts seem to go out the window. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Leaving Neverland.
Yes. I'm trying to think of jokes to say, but none of them are appropriate,
No.
and none of them are warranted in this situation.
And also, let's start off as light as we possibly can before we get into the darkness. Shahir, welcome back, buddy.
It's been a while.
You
hasn't
haven't been here in about a month.
I know. I've been listening to the podcast on the road as well. Well done to you. I enjoy. You know what? I listened to the episode on Velvet Buzzsaw,
Okay.
and I was like, you know what? I don't need to see this movie now. I enjoyed the
So
conversation.
We did that good of a job. And actually, I will credit all three of our guest co-hosts, Elise Brando, Stephen Buja, and Carly Houston.
All excellent, yeah. All very good Shahirs, if not better.
Yeah, no. It just, they filled your shoes quite well.
Yeah, and I've got big shoes, so, there you go.
But glad to have you back. You were on a whirlwind tour of your home country.
Countries. I was in Australia and New Zealand, which was wonderful to be home to. One thing I want to shout out before we move on to the episode was that it was really wonderful to talk to old friends and people I know who listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
So some of those people might be listening now, and one of the things that happened while I was overseas is that I actually made a little short, it's not quite a short film, but a little short piece while I was out there for another project I've been working on. And one thing that was just amazing was, I don't know if this was not my absolute recollection of how things worked in New Zealand, although New Zealand is wonderful. It's where I'm from. It's my home. But people were just so willing to pitch in and help out. So I wanted to shout out to a couple of people who I know listen to this podcast.
All right.
And helped me out an incredible deal while I was there. And they are Dan Lynch, who he basically spearheaded this production out of nothing. And listens to the podcast, listens to both of us.
Oh,
Stephen
thanks, Dan.
Press, who we talk about quite a lot on this podcast. Who is actually the person who kind of put me onto watching this film. He was like, oh, you guys should talk about this. But Stephen Press was incredible help to me while I was out there. It was just wonderful hanging out with him and his wife as well. And Nigel Stanford, who...
friend of the show, Nigel.
Who, again...
When's Nigel coming back on?
That's a good question. I have asked him many times, what
Nigel.
films when he wants to do, but he's a dad of two kids. He's like, I don't go to the movies. I listen to the podcast instead of going to the movies.
All right.
So again, thank you to those people. Oh, I also bumped into an old friend of mine, Andrew Patel in Australia, who also listens to the podcast. If you're listening, Andrew, it was lovely catching up with you.
Well,
again.
it sounds like everyone's excited about your project, which is great. And I mean, I would be personally excited if I knew that you were coming back finally as the Black Ranger.
Oh, the Black Power. That's really what I was
Is
doing.
that the project?
I was getting in
Can you
shape.
say?
I was doing some martial arts. They still shoot Power Rangers in New Zealand, I believe.
Well, that's why you were there.
Yeah, no, it was why I was there. I have fulfilled my destiny. What you don't realize is that in the recent movies, I was actually the Black Power Ranger.
No.
I just had the mask on.
Yeah.
But
you did great.
Again, thank you so much for all the people who filled in while I was gone as well. I really appreciate that, and I think you guys all did wonderful jobs and showed a better version of me. But we are here to discuss something a little more difficult. I was like, I came right back into the room to bring the tenor down.
We had 3 really fun episodes, even when the movies weren't always amazing. We did Velvet Buzzsaw.
Yeah.
We did Captain Marvel. Fuck yes. And we did the Lego Movie 2, the second part.
Now, I really want to see the Lego Movie 2 because I really enjoyed the first one. Do I need to see Captain Marvel?
Okay, so my instinct for you. So,
Look, I'm gonna be seeing Endgame, obviously.
Oh, then you should see it.
But but here's the thing, because I actually got into a conversation with Jonathan Blade on Twitter about this. Do I need to see Captain Marvel in order to do I need that information going into in-game?
Yes and no. I feel like to enjoy the full minutia of it, yes. I mean, of course, you'll be able to piece it together. You're a smart gentleman. Like, you get it. Here's what I will say about Captain Marvel. I fell in love with that movie very, very hard. And I think it is worthwhile on its own. I think it takes the Marvel style and does an interesting thing with it. Yeah. Now, here's the thing about me saying, yes, Shahir Dowd, go see Captain Marvel. I'm more interested in what you think of that different thing. So selfishly, I'm like, yeah, go see it. But I don't know if it's going to be your particular cup of superhero.
Right.
I thought it was phenomenal.
Right. Okay. I'm curious to see it because of Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, the directors, who did Half Nelson and Sugar, which are two movies that I really, really like.
Yeah.
And, it's that thing with, like, indie filmmakers kind of jumping into, like, this huge playground and what happens to them. And that's kind of my interest in it.
And also, I don't want to be like, here's the 2 or 3 reasons why I think you should see it and why it's interesting, because it will break some of the surprise of those 2 or 3 things. So, like, I can't even get into... If I had to weigh all my checks and balances, yes, you should see it.
Right.
And you should see it in the theater with really good sound.
Okay.
I think the sound mixing is super fun, especially going from space and back to Earth and like all that stuff.
Okay. Samuel L. Jackson looks good.
Samuel L. Jackson looks phenomenal. And I said this on the podcast, but I'll say it right here real quick. The only time it ever felt weird was with Samuel L. Jackson de-aged. It never was in the face, but it was in one movement where like something happened and he had to run.
Right.
And then it looked like young Sam Jackson running like an older man.
Okay.
Like, because it was like that, like, like kind of hunched over run, not like an action, like I'm a late 20s, early 30s.
Samuel L. Jackson in action movies. I just, the only one that I can think of is like The Negotiator, Die Hard with a Vengeance, where he was running around, but he was kind of old. Samuel L. Jackson has always struck me as over 40.
Well, like he's been in like 200 and something films. Like, he's over 40.
But he's like always been over 40. Like even in Do the Right Thing, which I think is the first movie I saw him in. He's like over 40. Jungle Fever, he feels over 40. Coming to America, where he plays like the guy who like holds up the McDowells.
Yeah.
He feels like he's over 40.
I just loved him because it was a chance to see young Nick Fury, like actually like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and kind of having fun.
Right.
And Nick Fury is not that ever in any of the other films. He's hard and grizzled.
Look,
and like,
man, David Hasselhoff is my Nick Fury, so... If it's not that, I'm not interested.
I'm not. Why did you come back?
You remember David Hasselhoff?
Yes, I remember the David Hasselhoff Nick Fury.
Oh my god,
that was fucking nightmare fuel.
All right, but look, here we are.
But speaking of nightmare fuel.
Nightmare Fuel. A few weeks ago, I think it was episode 200 of ours. 400.
400. You're getting ahead of yourself,
No,
sir.
I've been away a long time. Was our Separating Art from the Artist episode, where I don't think we brought up the topic of Michael Jackson specifically, but we did discuss this difficult thing that we are going through as a culture, and I think we should always be going through, is understanding the notion that there is a distinction between the art that people create and the artist behind it, and also that we have to understand that sometimes terrible people can create amazing art. And I think that was a fascinating discussion. We had our friends from Your Favors Problematic on that episode. And this episode is gonna, I think, dive deep into a specific case study. And I will say this, I kind of dreaded doing this because I felt like on the art versus artist episode, I made a case for not canceling someone, not doing cancel culture, but basically trying to understand the context of around someone when you're examining their art.
Right.
I will say, and I grew up as a very avid Michael Jackson fanatic. There was a lot of difficulty in watching this film for me because Michael Jackson is such a central part of my childhood.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about Moonwalker like
all the time.
No,
I do, and I own Moonwalker on Blu-ray, and this film is going to make it very difficult for me to think about Michael Jackson going forward. So I'm. I think all of that is to say, I may not say the right things in this episode, but I'm thinking very hard about this topic in relation to Michael Jackson. I don't know how you feel. Like, how does
I mean,
Michael
I feel
Jackson...
like I'm going to say all the right things. I'm not going to have to apologize for anything, and
that never happened.
This is all just going to just work out really well for me. No. What do I think about Michael Jackson? I mean, growing up, obviously, he was huge.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is less of a Michael Jackson thing, but I guess me growing up thing. I was not a huge music kid. I guess we'll call it that. In fact, my first CD that I ever owned, like I listened to some cassette tapes and stuff like that, but I think was like Offspring's Smash, followed by Green Day, Dookie, and a couple Weird Al albums. Like I started on a music train late, and I feel like by that time, like I knew Michael Jackson's songs. I knew Bad, I knew Thriller. But I never like glommed on to Michael Jackson as the like I guess what I'll just say is like the king of pop, right? And at the time you couldn't dispute it just based on numbers and like all that stuff. But it never that. So then when I was pretty young too when the first allegations came through,
1993.
Yeah, and then I don't really remember those, but the second ones I do in 2004 or 5 or whatever it was. It didn't really affect me from a media consumption standpoint because Michael Jackson, to be honest, with the occasional rewatch of Thriller or if someone did a really good remix of a Michael Jackson song, that would sort of be my thing. Now, I will say this though, even so, with me probably being the farthest one could be removed from Michael Jackson while still consuming pop culture.
Yeah.
Even after I watched this I watched the first part of this documentary during a day, and then I went to a birthday party at a bowling alley in the evening.
I bet you Michael Jackson was playing,
Michael Jackson was playing, and I was singing along with it. And then I caught myself, and I was like, he is so ingrained in pop music. Like, it's just like this is a case where and we'll determine, everyone can determine for themselves, but like if Michael Jackson is a cancer in the music industry, the music industry, I would almost say, is not a patient that could be saved if you cut it out. Like it's it's that deep.
Okay.
In pop music. I'm personally an advocate for cutting out that cancer, but it's incredibly difficult and complex.
Yeah. I think that's going to get into where we land after we've seen this documentary now.
One thing I wanted to ask you real quick before we even... So this is kind of leading into our experiences watching the film. 4 hours of film. What was your... Before watching this and before watching the accounts, what was your sort of take on all of this, like, as an adult, sort of knowing that this cloud hung over Michael Jackson's legacy? Like, we obviously grew up and we probably missed the first trial that much, but the second one was in the background, and then it became kind of like a joke.
Right.
I mean, South Park did a bunch of stuff with it, like all that jazz. How did you feel as an adult before watching this thing?
So I think that's one of those good examples of the thing around art versus the artist, which is that I hadn't really considered it much because probably because in 2003 when he was the second prosecution, he was found not guilty.
Yeah.
And the first time he
paid him $23 million.
Yeah, exactly. He settled out of court. And I think maybe those examples had kind of led me to believe that there's speculation but no concrete evidence. And I still happily purchased Moonwalker without thinking about it, or without considering the implications of my support for this artist.
Yeah.
I still happily had Michael Jackson in heavy rotation on my Spotify lists. Human Nature is a song that we played to my son while he was in the womb, kind of thing. And it was, the Michael Jackson track Ben is something that we would still sing to him as a harmony. So Michael Jackson was still very much part of my life. I'd never really, since he died, was it over 10 years ago now?
Yeah.
I hadn't really actually given him much thought other than still consuming his art. And I certainly, when he died, I knew that it was a sort of a big event for me. But I remember also feeling when he died that I wasn't as attached to him anymore because of the cloud that was hanging over him. I wasn't as, like, but after he died, I was like, oh, remember this great musician that like lived in this time, like period. And I hadn't really.
You always remember the good stuff about people that die.
So if for listeners, if you, I'm very curious for our age range of listeners and what, because I think we have a lot of younger listeners that weren't, some of them probably weren't even born around the first allegations of Michael Jackson's sexual impropriety. So I'm curious for listeners to email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod to let us know what their relationship to Michael Jackson is prior to watching this documentary.
If at all.
If at all, yeah. Because I think the other thing is this is a fairly ubiquitous documentary at this point. It is fairly easily available. In America, you can get it on HBO. In New Zealand, I watched it for free on a streaming service that's available for free there. So I think the conversation around Michael Jackson is getting a lot of steam. So just to sort of put it in context for me, and the thing that I think is difficult for me is that I certainly saw for these two people, James Safechuck and Wade Robson. I think I'm around the same age as both these men, and their fascination, obsession with Michael Jackson certainly mirrored my own. When I was a kid, I grew up in Fiji. Michael Jackson was the be-all and end-all. You couldn't, if you were into music, you were into Michael Jackson. There's just no question about it. As a kid, I was obsessed with breakdancing and doing the moonwalk and learning all of his moves. I would sit in my room alone and listen to his albums. I think Thriller and Bad were the first two cassette tapes I ever owned. When Dangerous came out, and Black and White was being, they did a big push on TV to play black and white. Like basically the entire nation stayed up to watch that, so it was a big deal for me. And Moonwalker, the film, was a formative part of my childhood. I had that film on VHS, a dubbed copy of it, to the point where I remember my dad got so annoyed that he would come home every day.
It was your Frozen.
It was either playing, because my son watches Frozen now all the time. As far as he's concerned, that's the greatest movie ever made. It's also the only movie ever made. But like, it would always be in the VHS machine, and he would get so frustrated.
It's called a VCR for you listening out there. The VHS machine.
The VHS machine. I was like, VCR, video cassette recorder, right? Yeah. Well, I first learned to edit by connecting two of those together.
I did too.
Yeah.
Double deck those things.
So I think my fascination with movies has a lot to do with Michael Jackson, because a lot of the way I would consume media, short form storytelling was through Michael Jackson. His music videos were short films. So everything that Wade and James is talking about in terms of their relationship to just the icon of Michael Jackson rang true for me. Like, I understood what that was like. And so if you told me, I think the thing that was difficult for me watching this is that if I ever landed in Wade or James's shoes, where you could meet Michael Jackson, I 100% believe I would be in the exact same position.
Right.
And I would have done exactly the same things they did, because Michael Jackson meant that much to me.
Right.
And not only just meeting someone whose work you love, but meeting that person.
Yeah.
I think in the special Oprah Winfrey reference New York Times thing, where a New York Times article where she said it's like staring into the sun. It's like staring at the face of God at that point.
And then that brings up sort of, for me, where does that come from? Like, where does that level that they experienced, that you said you might have experienced, that millions
I
of
certainly
people,
did.
that millions of people probably would.
Yeah.
Like, what that is, and I'm going to use this word, and I don't know if I'm using it correctly, but that is indoctrination on a global scale.
Indoctrination is probably the way we see it now.
Yeah,
at the time.
And I'm not saying that indoctrination has the tendency to mean like they meant to do it.
Right.
I'm talking about the media conglomerate. The big machine had a plan. And while marketing is a plan, I don't know if it wasn't. I'm not saying it was nefarious in that case, but I'm saying, like, I think something went off the rails, and when you elevate anybody
right
to that height,
right, and Yeah. Okay.
That's a problem. That's a problem.
So here's what I would say. So we talked. I'll talk about like my personal relationship to the fact that I loved Michael Jackson. Just looking at it objectively, like right now, and I think there's been a few people talk about this recently. There are no celebrities, there's no stars like Michael Jackson anymore today.
Nope.
And the thing that was amazing about Michael Jackson, I think, in that period is growing up with him. Getting this, like for people who are slightly older than me, they grew up with him as part of the Jackson 5 and then seeing kind of evolve into his own artist. But if you watch, was it the Grammy Awards where he first did the moonwalk, for the very first time, and I think he was performing Billie Jean at that Grammys, and for all the stuff we're going to talk about later about Michael Jackson, we should remember, whether you like him or not, there are only a handful of other artists that have been as transformative to the medium as him, and they would be people like Elvis Presley or the Beatles. So Michael Jackson is on that playing field. Aside from that, there is no one. For me growing up, I could just see myself just fascinated by looking at Michael Jackson, right? Like nobody looks like Michael Jackson. There's no other human being that had that sort of alien quality to them where they didn't quite look like they were human beings. Incredibly beautiful men. He was an incredibly beautiful man, like in his early 20s around the Billie Jean period, Beat It, that sort of thing. It was like, but beautiful in this way that was odd because I think Eddie Murphy did a piece about this, which was like Michael Jackson's, like one of the most beautiful people, but he ain't the most masculine of fellas. And that was strange because he had this femininity to him that was beautiful to look at, like it was it was really striking. And then his dance, his ability to dance, he was inspired by Bob Fosse, but how many people to this day, there's probably a couple of people who have danced the way he does.
Well, so here's the thing, and I don't know this, but this is something that I sort of feel in this day and age.
Yeah.
This is not just about Michael Jackson and his talent as a dancer. This is about talent in general for anybody.
Yeah.
Because we now have the ability to film ourselves doing anything and throw it on the internet.
Yeah.
I think we're realizing, and granted, it all depends on marketing machines and all that stuff, but like there are way more people that can do what a lot of super famous people can do that are out there. Now, do they have access? Do they have the spotlight? Is it the right place, right time? You never know that.
Right.
But I think, like, for instance, I've seen a ton of Michael Jackson dancing, and it's fantastic. I've seen random YouTubers dancing, and in my opinion, it's just as fantastic. And I think that plays into another reason of why we will not see a celebrity like this again as long as the media, we consume media the way we do.
Yeah.
It's because we will always see fantastic people doing spectacular things, and only those chosen at the right moments to do the thing will be elevated slightly, but the pool is so full now.
Yeah. But I think the thing to acknowledge there is, yes, Michael Jackson came from a period where like he was anointed at a very young age in an era unlike today where if you can basically everyone has the capacity to find their own audience now. And he was put in front of a large audience at a very young age. But the thing to remember there as well is that despite all of that, his particular brand of music and dance is so influential to the style of music and dance that exists today.
100%.
Justin Timberlake, for example, is so as an artist is so indebted to Michael Jackson as an icon because it feeds directly into the kind of work that he makes.
Yeah,
it's impossible, and I think this will come down to that question of separating art from the artist, because I think, as you have already alluded, it's impossible to discount the impact of Michael Jackson to music, pop culture, and dance. The notion of canceling Michael Jackson just seems insurmountable to me, because he's so clearly an important part of everything that we consume today.
It depends on your definition of cancel Michael Jackson.
Right.
You can't obviously take away the hundreds of thousands of probably millions of people he's influenced these other individuals' art. That's something you can't take away because they took something and they ran it through the filter of their own selves.
Yeah.
What you can do is not listen to the music actively. You can, discuss in detail your thoughts on all of this stuff with people that you know. There's the canceling someone, quote unquote, it's a very like juvenile kind of thing, because and I believe me, I fall for juvenile stuff all the time,
right.
but it's like we thrive, or not thrive, I'm sorry, we crave simplicity in our justice. And I think in sort of a hashtag culture, sometimes that can sort of, we get this one statement or something that look at all of the popular shit, either pro or con, whatever you're into, and there's a 1 to 4 word sentence about it.
Right.
I mean, there's good things that let people know about things like the Me Too movement. There's what I would consider bad things, like Make America Great Again. Like, we live in such a slogany thing. So I think when tackling something as complex as dealing with these allegations and dealing with what this documentary presented and what I believe to be true, I think it's a little bit important to not just lean on the cancel Michael Jackson. We will never cancel Michael Jackson, but we could interact with his specific media that he has left us because he is now dead.
Yeah.
We can react to that and interact with it in different ways that are less conscience clearing, I guess would be the term.
I think and again, I think we should sort of come to that point after we've discussed
we should talk about the movie. We're talking about Michael right now.
No, because I think that's the question that the film is kind of posing indirectly. And I think the way that this film is being presented now is forcing all of us, and I think for good reason, to discuss that question. So what is Leaving Neverland about? I mean, if we haven't described it already.
why don't I have IMDb tell you? Mm-hmm. At the height of his stardom, the world's biggest pop star, Michael Jackson, began long-running relationships with 2 boys, aged 7 and 10, and their families. They now allege that he sexually abused them.
Yeah. This is directed by Dan Reed. It premiered at Sundance to much controversy, actually, and I think that controversy is fairly fascinating around this film, which is that there are kind of 2 camps around this movie. And one is the people who adamantly believe that Michael Jackson is innocent, and therefore this documentary should be given no weight. And then there are, I'm not exactly sure how the other camp falls, but there's a sort of a spectrum on the other side of people who love Michael Jackson, who are sort of troubled by this, people who don't like Michael Jackson at all and absolutely believe them. So it's kind of an interesting spectrum on, but I feel like the anti this documentary people are very much Michael Jackson has never done any wrong kind of thing.
I mean, that's zealousy.
Yeah.
Everyone's done something wrong. I mean, that's, but I've read a lot of these tweets.
Yeah.
And you can normally, in my, again, opinion, this is all opinion, based on how many words are capitalized in a tweet, you can tell how much of a zealot a person is.
Yeah.
Because you do know you're not actually screaming, right? Like, when you type an all caps thing, like, you're okay. Like, and I've done it for comedy because I think it's silly, but these people aren't joking. It's look, zealousy is a weird beast. And when you see it in every piece of culture. You see it in musicians that people love, like Michael Jackson. You see it in video game culture specifically. Like, people base whenever someone bases a large chunk of who they are on an external source, be it a pop star or a game franchise or films or a television series or comic book, whatever.
Right.
When something comes out that you realize that a part of what you love and what you've based your person on, and maybe you're a good person, the stuff that like you linked to yourself is problematic or bad or on some scale.
Yeah.
You have 2 options.
Right.
Reinvent who you are.
Yeah.
Or double down and be like, no, I'm a good person. Therefore, no, of course not. No. And what's easier?
Right.
I mean, option 2.
Yeah.
So, and again, I don't think that if you don't like, there's arguments to be had.
Yeah.
Discrediting some of the stuff in this documentary.
Right.
And there's ways to have those arguments that would make me listen to you as a rational human being. I wouldn't agree with them, and I don't think there's actually an argument that would turn me, but there's ways where you can sound like not a crazy person and discuss it, even if your opinions differ from mine. And so far, I've only really seen, not all, but like the majority of the responses have been like just screaming at the void, like, no, there's nothing wrong. And it's like, okay, but like, this all happened, like, even, you know.
Well, that leads me to my question about, like, I guess, what did you think of the documentary?
So the doc itself, I mean, it's super effective. There's no question. The 2 testimonials are what the whole doc lies on. And I mean, look, I'm not to say that I've never been lied to and believed it, but I believe these 2 men, like 120,000%. I believe these 2 men. The level of emotion and fear and release and love in a lot of different ways that you can see if you have a drop of empathy in you. Like, these aren't men trying to cash in on the fact they were molested as children. Like, that's not why they're there.
Well, there is some that is some of the counter arguments against Wade Robson, in particular, who and I'm just laying this out there.
No, you should.
In terms of what we do as a podcast, which is like look behind the film. Wade Robson has sued the Jackson estate for, I think, $1 billion or some ridiculous.
There's
number.
A real number.
He's also there is evidence surrounding the idea that he is annoyed at the fact that he wasn't able to choreograph a particular Cirque du Soleil Michael Jackson show that was coming. There's been email evidence come forward that he wanted to do that, and then there is this question mark around him in particular. I guess around his very vocal support of Michael Jackson up until the point of his lawsuit, which and also I believe that he was shopping around a book that he was trying to make around the same time as well. I'm just putting that out there.
Of course, and those things, none of those swayed my opinion of these events.
But those things aren't presented in the documentary, right?
No. Well, that's I'm sort of getting to that.
Yeah.
But just sort of to finish up my thing.
Yeah.
To say that. And I think, well, here's the thing. I think the reason why it's an effective documentary is it's not just Wade.
Right.
It's also Jimmy. James. And you can see from the 2 sort of sides of it, right? Like, Wade stuck around in showbiz.
Yeah.
And James really didn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. As far as I know. No, he's in film production or something like that.
It's So the fact that, like, you have both of these men coming forward with incredibly similar stories, and the documentary does what opinionated documentaries do.
Right.
They're going to load you up on the right music cues. They're going to give you ominous aerial shots.
Does anyone love drone shots more than a documentary?
No. Oh my God. Yeah. It's like you could do a whole documentary just with drone footage. Why not just do the interviews via drone? It is a very one-sided doc.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. But so this is the interesting part, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I believe them, other than I believe the emotions they're portraying.
Right.
I don't think Wade is a spectacular actor that's now doing that. Like, it just doesn't play for me.
Right.
The accounts of where these children were when, that's all there. Like, these kids aren't lying about where they were or sleeping in his bed or going to Neverland or any of this stuff.
Right.
Right? They're not like people know that that's all true. What is the most logical, taking sort of the emotional account even out of this if you possibly can, what is the most logical explanation for this continual sort of let's call it sleepover culture
Mm-hmm.
from a adult man and a young boy, and then sort of discontinuing that activity at a certain period of time when a quote new friend is involved. Like, that's not how friendships work.
Yeah.
That's not how normal, I would say, adult to child relationships work. And you could say, oh, well, you know, Michael just was very childlike in nature and blah, 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 blah. Sure. But again, it doesn't quite matter. Even and this is just maybe, this is me again.
Yeah.
But there's no fucking reason, even if nothing happened, for these kids to be sleeping in a bed with Michael Jackson.
Right.
So taking all of that,
Mm-hmm.
that is why I buy it, despite the fact, like, there are other ways to get money other than going on a national scale and be ready for the amount of shitstorm you are putting into your life to talk about how you were abused as a child by one of the most famous people on the planet. Like, all of that doesn't check out for me. And therefore, with the abilities, with putting all that information forward, and knowing that the doc is trying real hard to make something terrible and ominous seem even more terrible and more ominous, if that's even possible, I can separate that sort of like what we talked about, like documentaries sort of doing that and being one-sided and trying to like really get you.
Yeah.
Separating all that just from the stuff that's been presented and the stuff that I've read.
Right.
So I think it is an effective doc in two ways. One, the information it provides outside of its stylistic context is damning.
Right.
And two, the stylistic context is helpful in that, though I do hope that people can separate that from what they're seeing and have an emotional, have a logical response along with an emotional one. What about you? How did you think this doc played?
So as a doc, I think it is, it's very noticeably one-sided. It's very, very purposely one-sided, but very noticeably one-sided. I think in terms of, you know, like we reviewed OJ Made in America last year, I believe it was, where I think that is a film that is that has a breadth of information that it is trying to dispel and it's sort of, and it's trying to convince you of an argument. In this case, this is a film which is basically trying to present to you a point of view, and as such, the film doesn't necessarily back up that point of view with supporting evidence. It is basically there to kind of give you these testimonials from these two people. It's almost as though it's giving Wade and James the opportunity to be on the witness stand and for you just to be the jury and listen to it. And I think I don't disagree with that. With that approach, I think it is sort of documentary manipulation in sort of the classic style. There are a couple of other films that came to mind when I thought about this particular style, and the person I wanted to sort of mention in counterpoint is Errol Morris, who would do films like The Fog of War, which is a documentary about Henry Kissinger. Wow. And it's just a one-to-one interview with Henry Kissinger. The thing about The Fog of War is, or Errol Morris's documentary style. Errol Morris famously had this device that he created called the Interrotron, which is awesome. It's basically a reverse a filter that you put on top of a camera, which allows the person who's being interviewed to talk to a person, but behind that person is the camera itself. So they talk to the person as though they're there, but they're actually talking directly to the camera.
It's like a teleprompter, but with a face on.
Yeah, exactly. It's a teleprompter rewired.
And what's it called?
The Interrotron.
That's fucking terrifying.
Well,
that's like out of 1984.
And the reason he did it was that he wanted the audience to have a direct one-to-one connection with Henry Kissinger in that case, so that they could essentially, and I think the name is appropriate, interrogate his answers. You're only getting this point of view, but you're invited through the conversation to interrogate and see whether you believe this is true or not.
Sure.
In the case of Leaving Neverland, the filmmaker is saying this is true. It's not interrogating his either of these people's answers, and I think that's an important distinction to make. That said, I think because of all the things that I know about Michael Jackson, the things that you pointed out as well in terms of like the surrounding context around Michael Jackson that we understand, the sort of just the common sense around like whether you should have, if you're a 35-year-old man or however age you are, whether you should invite children to sleep in a room with you, in your bed with you, and whether you should separate those children from their parents.
Yeah.
I do believe these two men. I think Wade, in a classical sort of trial situation, would be a very difficult witness to fully support. I could see him being easily torn down by past actions, or just surrounding actions, which would bring into question his reliability. But I 100% believed him and James in particular, in this context, because I think I think the reason why I found the documentary important to watch is that it highlighted to me, even if you don't believe Wade or James,
sure,
it highlighted to me what grooming is. And I'm a parent now. Obviously, I think I've mentioned that before.
Are you?
Yeah. No.
Oh, congrats.
It just happened. But the process of grooming is so insidious and so terrifying. And I think I watched the post special as well with Oprah Winfrey, and the way she described it as well was that I found the wording very odd, but I understood what she was trying to say. She was like, if the abuser is any good, you will not know it's happening. And for these two people and their families, and the grooming happens to everyone around them, they didn't realize it was happening. And I think that, and again, coming from the point of view that I was coming from, which is that if you told 7-year-old Shahir you could meet Michael Jackson and go to Neverland, and at some point, just through maybe a day or two's sort of interaction, at some point Michael Jackson said to you, "Oh, or you can sleep in my room tonight," I could see 7-year-old Shahir saying, "Yes, I want to do that." And I would nag at my parents to make sure that happened. And then I could see then the sort of roll-on effects of how the abuse begins and how it starts and how it continues, and how Michael Jackson could then manipulate the person to believing that it's natural and it's part of life, and everyone else is ignorant about it. I could see all of that happening, and it all makes sense to me psychologically. Whether I believe these two men 100%. If you don't believe it, regardless if you don't believe it, I think you can watch this and see the process of how it can happen.
I mean, this is classic cult mentality. You don't get this amount of grooming without help. Right. And by that I mean not all of it is, and like any, I'll even quote Oprah Winfrey, if any cult that's good at it.
Yeah.
Most of the members don't realize they're doing anything wrong.
Right.
The people that are complicit in this go beyond just the people at Neverland and his close handlers and all that stuff. It's the machine that allows him to be able to do this, to the point where, and this is where the doc never actually got into, and I kind of wished it did, the mental state of Michael Jackson. Because while I 100% believe that this abuse occurred and that he is an abuser and that he damaged these two men and probably others, just based on the pattern of what has been presented, it doesn't do anything to discuss
how this happened,
how or why. Like for instance, I never for a second do I believe Michael Jackson is a mustache-twirling villain who's like, I'm going to use my entire machine to go do this stuff because I want to and fuck everybody. Like that's not what it is.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson was a sick man.
Right.
And that doesn't excuse anything that he did.
Yeah.
But there is a discussion to have there about
cyclical abuse,
the effects that has on the mind, what that does to people when they are given unlimited resources, allowing that to continue because someone is your meal ticket. Like there are things here that are classic cult style moves.
Yeah.
And that again, and I'll go back to it. Even if no abuse happened, the level of indoctrination is that of a cult.
Yeah, and the level, again, it's important. And I think to that point, I think the documentary could be a better film if it sort of took a little bit more of the O.J. Simpson Made in America route, which was that it is a much more thorough examination of the context of this whole situation. But that's not what the documentary is trying to do. That's not what Dan Reed, the director, is trying to do. He's trying to just give these two men a platform to tell their story.
And here's a question, and this, I guess, I'll ask you, and then I'd love to hear what other people think. onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or onlymoviepod on Twitter. Send us your thoughts on this next thing. Do you think that it was made this way, given these two men just having a platform to tell their side of a thing, because of how adamant and how intense the opposition has always been? This is the highest profile piece of media condemning Michael Jackson ever.
Yeah.
So in the public zeitgeist, I guess I want to make my question simpler. In the public zeitgeist, because it is so weighted on the side of Michael Jackson is innocent, it's in a court of law, in public opinion, it's easier on both sides. It's easier to believe he's innocent because then you don't have to do any hard lifting of your own mental awareness. So a lot of different things.
Right.
Do you think that in a situation like this, even though I would call this as we're looking for a fair and balanced documentary, this is not that.
Yeah.
But do you think that it works as a counterweight? And do you think because of the enormity of the opposition side, let's call it, the fact that it is so pendulum swing to the other side is more okay than, say, a documentary that didn't have a full-blown media machine behind the alternate facts?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Kellyanne. No, I
did
think,
air quotes.
I think there is some validity to that, in that the other thing is that Michael Jackson is dead, right? You know, he's passed on, and so we're dealing with the remnants of his legacy. And I think in many ways this film is about the legacy of Michael Jackson. And I think Dan Reed himself has also talked about how this movie's not about Michael Jackson. It's about these two men's story.
Yeah.
And I think from that point of view, it's an effective documentary. Whether, if the purpose of the documentary is to fully condemn Michael Jackson, then I don't think it's as effective, because it opens too many, it has too many doors that are opened up around it because of its lack of context. But you also have to be aware of the person you're dealing with here as well. As I would struggle to think that no one knows who Michael Jackson is. You know, like compared to O.J. Simpson, for example, where I was like, I sort of loosely know, you know, for a lot of people, it was like they loosely know who O.J. Simpson was.
I didn't know who he was until the murders.
Yeah, exactly. But for Michael Jackson, I think we're in a slightly different orbit of the universe. And I think in those terms, again, to basically allow these two men to tell their story, I think it is effective. I would personally, I think it could be richer if we were allowed to interrogate those stories a little bit more as an act of documentary filmmaking. But that's not what this film is. And I think, and again, I walked away believing these two men. And I think it's very difficult to watch this film and not believe these two men and the stories that they have to tell, because it's simply again, you know, and I bring my personal experience to this about, you know, how I felt about Michael Jackson as a child.
Yeah.
It simply makes sense. I watched, and I started thinking a lot about the other media I had consumed around Michael Jackson around this period. So during his court case in 2005, there was a big Oprah Winfrey special about him, where she interviewed him. I'm not sure if it was the 2005 or the 1993 one, but again, all of those. That documentary, or that piece of media is kind of, it's like embedded with the enemy kind of thing, you know, like it's surrounded by his music, it's visiting him in a place, and his aura of stardom is such that it's hard to be drawn into that, regardless of what you're trying to do. Like, there are very little pieces of media where you see Michael Jackson taken away, you know, like having his stardom stripped away from him. So you're just seeing, you know, like the classic way to do that is to show the mugshot, right? The mugshot is the way you strip a human being out of their stardom, and you have to like think about them as a human being again. Michael Jackson is such an alien personality, such an alien looking figure, that I don't think there's very many pieces of media that allow you to do that. And especially like the media that was around him all kind of, they played Michael Jackson music in the background. I watched this morning Living with Michael Jackson, the Martin Bashir documentary that came out around that period as well. And that's basically following Michael Jackson around as he's in Las Vegas buying up, millions of dollars worth of stuff that's, with his music playing in the background that's following him around Neverland. They do, Martin Bashir does try to ask him questions about, like, is it appropriate for you to be sleeping with children? But that's like 10% of the documentary. The other 90% of it is just like,
look how cool Michael Jackson is.
I mean, whether they want to or not, just basking in the awe of this person's life, which is so different from so many other people. But, okay, so coming back to the substantive quality of this film in terms of, like, what happened to these two people, I think the couple of the big takeaways for me are, again, grooming, how grooming works. And since watching this film, I'm on high alert now. Like, just this idea that basically the purpose of grooming, in a way, is to indoctrinate a person to, particularly children, to indoctrinate them to not realize that they're being abused. And that's kind of what Oprah Winfrey, said when she said, if the abuser is any good, you don't realize it. Mm-hmm. The second thing is how important grooming is in terms of, like, grooming the people around the person that's going to be abused.
Right.
Because the thing that I think is interesting, the counterweight to this film, is seeing the parents.
Well, seeing the mothers.
Yeah, seeing the mothers. Well, I want to get to the parents in a second, because I think the other thing that was fascinating to me is both these families had not absentee fathers, but the parental unit was broken in some way. Yeah. And I think that was to me, that was the sort of Wade's father. I think his name was Dennis. Mm-hmm. The story of Wade's father, who basically, almost in a way, had his entire family leave him while he was dealing with depression, maybe bipolar disorder or something like that.
They left their sick father/husband to go hang out with the biggest pop star in the world, and
he committed suicide.
And how do you as a human being compete with that?
I'm not sure. I don't know if that's what his, like that was the core of his problems.
No. I'm not saying that's not why that happened to him. He was from what we understand, he was a sick man who needed help, and I don't think he got what he needed for various places.
And his family basically left him. And the thing that I think of the tragedy of this is the fact that the Robson family was basically swallowed into the orbit of Michael Jackson. Whether consciously and purposefully, whether they wanted to, or I feel like they wanted it as well. Like the mother. And Wade, but Wade's 7 years old, so what are you going to do? But the mother absolutely wants to be in this world, and I think both mothers are seduced by the lifestyle. They're seduced by the prospect of this. On the other, so that was the tragedy of Wade Robson's family. The tragedy of the Safechucks, in a weird way, it's not appropriate to say it was funny, but there's a sort of sitcom quality to this idea that, like, that Michael would turn up at the Safechuck's house, and, like, it was all, like, in my mind, I just kept on thinking of Alf. The TV show Alf. I was like, I just kept thinking, because remember, the mother says at one point he would walk in and go, "The Safechucks," and I was like, and she was like making him cookies and doing his laundry.
I did the wrong laugh. It should have been, ha!
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all the way from Melmac.
Melmac, Gordon Shumway, baby. My parents had this is a side note. My grandparents at their farm named all their rooms because they're like old school. They had the such and such room and the whatever, and the guest room was the Gordon Shumway room. And I got to sleep in Alf's room. That was my favorite thing.
But there was something like again in the early stages of it, and I think this is part of the grooming process as well. Something sort of oddly comedic about this idea that the world's biggest pop star comes to, like, this little tiny house and hangs out. It feels like a Mork and Mindy episode or Alf again. That was the only thing. But, like, the tragedy there, I think, was the sense that the mother, let her just basic maternal instincts go out the window because it's Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that. Like, I do. I believe I would be smarter than that myself now, but that's because I've seen the documentary and because I've grown up a little bit. You have to remember, at that time, there, celebrity and stardom were very different things than they are today.
Sure.
And Michael Jackson coming over to your house and you're baking him cookies. Like and then Michael Jackson like flying you over to Neverland Ranch whenever you want to go. And Michael Jackson taking you on tour wherever you want to go.
Like paying for your house or something.
Paying for your house, giving you home loans and that kind of thing. You're in the orbit of the sun, at that point. But
then with the sun analogy,
yeah.
Right? We're in orbit of the sun. The Earth is in the orbit of the sun. You know what else is in orbit of the sun? Is Venus and Mercury. And they're either husks or super hot birdie gas planet. Like there is a moment in time when if you are this might not be the correct terminology, but if you are a healthy moral person,
right?
I'm not saying you can't get swept up. That's how cults work. Smart people get brought into cults,
right?
But I almost feel like, and again, I've never been a parent, I don't know this, but like I feel like that is the kind of thing where you'd catch yourself getting caught up because of your child. Like, I could see myself getting caught up in a thing, but if I was responsible for another human being that I happened to create, that to me, it would, at least for me, would be the, hold up a minute. Like,
I'm going to bring up a movie which I know you hate.
Okay, cool.
Spotlight. So
I do hate Spotlight.
I love Spotlight, but in Spotlight there's
I don't hate Spotlight.
I've watched Spotlight a bunch of times since then, and I find it gets richer every time. And there's a thing in Spotlight where one of the victims is saying, your life is falling apart, and a priest takes you in and shines a light on you and tells you you're special. It's hard not to. And a priest is your model for God, and so when your model for God kind of comes into your life, everyone kind of believes that this is a good thing.
I 100% see that.
And you know what I mean? And so in the case of Michael Jackson, I think it's a similar thing, which is that now it goes to extremes, but it goes to extremes with priests and abusing children as well. You know what I mean? Like the leaving your child with a grown man who is celibate, like you in all parameters, you should be kind of double guessing that, but the power structure in place, the celebrity in place when it comes to Michael Jackson allows the quote I mentioned at the beginning of this is that what you would believe to be standard instincts seems to go out the window when you have someone like that. And you and I have both been around celebrities, and like we've both talked to people that we've idolized from afar,
sure,
kind of thing, and you do find yourself. I find myself, like. Sometimes the levers of like rationality go out the window slightly, like just in very subtle ways.
But I will say, at least for me, to a point.
Of course, to a point. Michael Jackson is telling you that your child is special, and it's Michael frickin' Jackson.
But
the biggest star on the planet.
And if the biggest star, if God came down and said that my child was special, I'd be like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I'd start hanging out and I'd do all the stuff and da-da-da-da. But then there is a line.
Of course.
But that is also how indoctrination works. I
don't know
it's
who
easy to say that.
I don't know who your idols are, but I'm sure there are people.
Here's the fascinating thing. This is what I wanted to get to. And this is going to kind of go a little bit.
Just before that, I was just going to say, imagine if you're a devout Catholic and the Pope comes to your house. You know what I mean? Think of it that way.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
I can't.
Right.
I can't imagine that. I think any level of power like that, the Pope, any kind of organized religion, any sort of political figure, any pop star, the second that you equate them to something that is so undamnable,
right?
The second that they become more than human and the thing that gives your life meaning, that's the problem. That's, and I'm not saying that there aren't good things that can come from organized religion and things like that, but the second that you as a human being put your own, you logic yourself out of making your own well-being, putting that to the side, or the well-being of someone you love, putting that to the side because someone is an idol or a demagogue, That's the problem. And I honestly, this all comes back to a little bit of my worldview. That's why I don't want to buy in. That's why I can't buy into any of that stuff, because I honestly believe there is not a person on this planet that could come to me and right away, like, again, indoctrination's a different thing, but I'm paranoid as fuck. Like, it's a hard sell for me.
Again, I don't know who that person is for you.
I don't think there is one.
I'm gonna say I think there probably is one, and you just don't.
Let's try to figure it out.
No. Because my point here is you can understand how this happens. Even if you can't think of that person, that doesn't matter. What I'm saying is, you could understand how this could happen.
Yes, to logical, smart people.
To logical, smart people.
100%. But it's also the reason why, and the reason why I can't fully empathize outside of a logical empathy in a way,
right,
is because I think I think I cracked me in a weird way.
Right.
That idea that I believe is infallible is the idea that no one is infallible. Like, you can't. That's why I'm having a hard time being like, oh, what's the most?
But it's not about infallibility. It's the idea that you can be
around a person.
No, that you can be seduced by power.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what it is.
But there is, but like even you said before, and how we've been discussing, like, the level of power that the Pope or Michael Jackson or whoever has
in relation to you.
Yes, yeah. I'm trying to. I purposely in my own life.
Yeah.
Try not to have that with anyone.
And that's very admirable.
Maybe it's not true.
But you can see.
I can see other. Yeah.
You can see it happening, yes. Right? And you can see it.
But that's why I'm saying that's the dangers of doing that with anybody. That's why I believe the things I believe is those intrinsic dangers.
And maybe 99% of the population would not allow their children to get into the situation. But this is again think of who these children are. The first is James Safechuck is a child actor whose mom is trying to get him into show business, who ends up on a Michael Jackson commercial, who somehow is also a good kind of emulates Michael Jackson. It's like the Catholic to the Pope. And Wade Robson is a Michael Jackson impersonator who's 7 years old. I think these are very specific children that Michael Jackson has picked. You know what I mean? Like, the Pope is not going to work on me. But the Pope, but like to a family that's grown up in Catholicism that worship, that believes, the Pope's going to work for them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to like, how do I put it? It's just why I don't like monotheistic power structures.
Of course, logically nobody does.
No, not logically nobody does. Logically, a lot of people do because it is easy. It's very, and I'm not saying that I'm not faulting anybody for having a belief structure or something like that. It's very helpful. It can help you. And to be honest, we're getting off on a tangent, and I apologize. Because I believe what I believe and feel the way I feel, a lot of times I'm super lonely. Right. Like, and that's a way, like, I've thought about like, oh, like, we've talked about this before with like, I don't have a tie with my historical background. I don't have a tie with any sort of thing like, whatever. I have a small family, yada, yada, yada. So I 100% see the drive to want to use the orbity term, to use the gravitational term, like orbit around one thing or multiple things, and then when that thing comes at you, holy shit.
Yeah, when the light shines on you from the thing that you have idolized your entire life, it's I don't agree with it.
Yeah,
but I think that's how it happens. Because logically, if you're a parent and someone all you have to do is take Michael Jackson out of the equation. All you have to say is, 35-year-old man wants to sleep with your child. Any parent,
they could be like, "Fuck you."
Yeah, any parent, will say no. Now, put in the context that like you're a Catholic, and the Pope says I can heal your child if he sleeps in the room.
And here's the thing: I would love to. So again, that's why I can't say for sure, because I can't put my mindset in that thing.
Yeah.
But like everyone in that who even is a devout Catholic, I think would like to say, in that situation, in that hypothetical. Of course not.
Yeah.
But when you get to
But
it,
child abuse happens.
and here's the thing, 100%. And this is why I think, getting back to the film, the two mothers and their different reactions by the end of the second part.
Yeah.
And also the complex emotions that both James and Wade have for Michael himself. Like,
yeah, I think that's a really fascinating part about child abuse that isn't talked about much, but this film gets into.
Yeah, I mean, I'm blanking, but which one of them had the ring?
James.
James.
Yeah.
Like, he pulled out this ring from a supposed wedding ceremony between the two of them, and like, he is decimated. Like, and not just in like. It's a cacophony of emotions because there's all of the stuff from the abuse, but like
there's also the rejection of this relationship that he had formed. You know, like that's the thing that I think this film kind of portrays beautifully.
He got abused by the person that was also the love of his life that also dumped him.
Yeah,
and it's like, and he was a child.
Yeah,
like fuck, like that's insane, and you see that on his face.
Yeah,
and that's not something. And this just, I guess, sort of, we've been talking for a little bit. We can go for a little bit longer, but I just sort of, my final thoughts on it is like that moment perfectly encapsulates what I think the importance of this documentary is. Do I think it's a fair and balanced look at this? No, but like I said before, the media coverage around Michael Jackson has never been fair and balanced because he's Michael fucking Jackson.
But I think you, sorry, and I don't mean to interrupt,
yeah.
but I'm going to. But you asked a really important question at the beginning, which is that how did Michael Jackson become Michael Jackson? Like, why is it that Michael Jackson, and I think I answered with like, there's no one like Michael Jackson on the planet.
I think it was it's the right media place at the right media time.
Yeah.
It's a tremendously talented team
yeah.
that brought him forward. And then you look at those people, and I don't know the structure of who came in and who left or who whatever, but like, he wasn't doing anything. His success or his terrible acts, he wasn't doing anything alone.
Right. Yeah. There is, and that's one thing that I think the doc doesn't really get into.
It doesn't. But again, it goes back to what you said before. It's the story of these two boys, and these two boys didn't deal with the staff and the managers. They dealt with Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
I would have loved to hear more discussion, but maybe the parents were just so enamored with Michael Jackson it never really happened. Like the staff that would then tell the mother that they'd move them farther and farther away down the hotel block when they traveled.
Right.
Like, who are these people?
So they did during I think a couple of the court cases. They did interview like housemaids in the house, and
But I'm not even talking about maids. I don't want to like.
Yeah, but people who kind of said that they saw the abuse and walked away. But obviously, I think what you're pointing to as well is that there were people who not only saw the abuse, but
actively profited off of it,
actively engaged in it.
Yeah,
you know, actively supported it by doing what Michael needed in order for it to happen.
And I think the thing that I would have been interested to see would be to have more discussions about those people.
Yeah,
because those people are still alive, and I want to hear what they have to say.
I mean, it is kind of like the question around, and again, you know, coming back to Spotlight is that it takes. I think one of the quotes in Spotlight is, "It takes a village to abuse a child."
Yeah,
you know, like it's a system of abuse that is required, and that's what happens in this film. It's just, I think to me the most extraordinary thing is for me personally seeing how it could have had. You know, like I'm nowhere near Michael Jackson, but if those circumstances presented itself, I could easily see myself in that scenario.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think the thing that you're talking about as well that was so difficult to watch and understand is that the way, again, the Oprah special kind of gets onto this as well, is that you know, there's this misconception that abuse and rape, for example, is you know, violent or throwing someone against the wall. Yeah, always violent and throwing someone against the wall. In this case, it wasn't. It was like, you know, they even in their own words, it was gentle, it was tender, it was loving, and they talk about this in the Oprah special, which was like, it felt good.
Yeah,
you know, and that's the sort of complex web of human sexuality and emotion and difficulty that we have to deal with. So the thing that really, I think, concretely made my opinion solid about believing these two people,
right,
is like Wade has, and again, I think Wade is the more problematic.
He
figure.
literally, if what he's saying now is true, he lied under oath.
He lied under oath, yeah, and he's also tried to profit from his relationship with Michael Jackson. And his career is entirely based on his relationship with Michael Jackson. But I I think the part of the separating art from the artist kind of activity goes both ways in this situation, which is that we should do that with Michael Jackson. We should also do that with Wade, and we should hold that two truths are possible with Wade, which is that he lied under oath and he tried to profit from this, but also that he's telling the truth. That doesn't mean, none of those things negate the fact that he might be telling the truth, and I believe he is. And the thing that sort of solidified that for me is this notion that he accepted the abuse because he didn't see it as abuse. Like he saw it as a loving relationship.
Yeah.
And that he was saddened by the fact that he was replaced and dumped and moved away from. And he's still kind of engaged with Michael Jackson. If he could just get back into the orbit of Michael Jackson, he would be okay and happy. But it was when he became a parent.
Yeah.
And he thought about that relationship to his son. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl.
I think it was his daughter.
Yeah, whatever his or her name is. And I think to me that what this documentary did cyclically without really, I think, trying to do it cyclically, was acknowledging the role that he as a parent has in protecting his child. And he as a child, he's sort of dealing with a complex web of sexual emotion and that sort of thing. But as a parent, he realizes that he would never let that happen to his child.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's why he's telling his story.
I think one last piece of filmmaking thing I want to say that I liked about this documentary is the first half is the majority of the super heavy shit. Like it's the abuse. It's 2 hours of just going into that nightmare.
Yeah.
The second, and at the end of it, I was like, am I going to watch another 2 hours of this? I'm like, I felt sick. I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then the second half is sort of more of the stuff you just brought up, and sort of the after he died, and then like the, how that affected, and then sort of their coming out stories of letting people know about how and why that happened, etc. And that to me, I thought was another reason why I found the documentary effective.
Right.
Because it takes it away from the salaciousness of Michael Jackson, and it puts the importance squarely on these men and their families dealing with a trauma.
Yeah.
And through becoming a parent, through a couple different ways that it happened, and then it starts interviewing all the family members and like how they reacted, and like they were lied to their whole time too because they didn't think of it a different way. So like I was really happy that, while it didn't do some things I would have liked to see, that second half really surprised me in a good, strong way.
Yeah.
To not just be like another sort of like, it's easy to look at like the concept of this documentary and be like, oh, it's just a salacious hit piece.
Yeah.
Without watching it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But after seeing that second part in particular, I was like, okay, this is for the. I would argue the. And I'm not talking about a monetary benefit. I'm just talking about the benefit of these men's stories being told and them being able to finally tell the truth about a thing, which I believe happened.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to read just quickly the Jackson Estate's rebuttal of this film, because they wrote a letter rebutting this whole thing. But they said in there, and they're suing HBO, by the way, which will be held in court, I think, in June or something along those lines.
Cool.
But this is what the Jackson Estate says: Leaving Neverland isn't a documentary. It is the kind of tabloid character assassination Michael Jackson endured in life and now in death. The film takes uncorroborated allegations that supposedly happened 20 years ago and treats them as fact. These claims were the basis of lawsuits filed by these two admitted liars, which were ultimately dismissed by a judge. The two accusers testified under oath that these events never occurred. They have provided no independent evidence and absolutely no proof of support of their accusations, which means the entire film hinges solely on the word of two perjurers. And I think it is important to note that if you're just looking at this from a legal point of view, I was really curious as to whether this documentary takes away the right of reasonable reasonable rebuttal from the Jackson estate. You know, they have a right to refute these claims, and whether the documentary, by not interviewing them, actually, you know, denies them that right. And I'm also, the other thing that the documentary kind of like does that I think is really interesting is that neither of these cases are being tried. There's no case here. So what's happening is someone is basically just saying this happened, and the documentary is treating it back. I walk away 100% believing these two people. If it didn't happen, this is an incredible piece of storytelling, an incredible piece of manipulation. But I do walk away believing that this happened. And I think the important thing for me is it comes back to our art versus artist discussion, which is that since watching the documentary, whenever Michael Jackson plays, I wince. And I think about my response to it. And I am starting to like think about, you know, what is my relationship to Michael Jackson? And I think, you know, I think this is consistent from what I said about art versus the artist, which is that I don't want to cancel the art versus the artist episode, which is that I don't want to cancel Michael Jackson. I want to have that wince response. I want to have that response that now is informed by new context.
Yeah.
And the weird part about it that I think I'm trying to negotiate is that, and even the documentary points to this as well, is all of this was in plain sight.
Yeah.
You know, you always saw Michael Jackson with children. If you watched Michael Jackson's Bad music video, you know, it's all about children. You know, like his...
Every commercial,
Yeah. There's a really interesting article on, it's not Gizmodo, but it's, sorry, I'll just pull it up right now, Jezebel, by Rich Wozniak, which is basically analyzing history, the album history, from the point of view of, like, what was Michael Jackson trying to tell us?
Yeah.
If this was the background to those things, like, how do we now reread that? And I think, for me, that's what our role is. That's what our role is. The only podcast about movies is not to, like, yes, we believe that these two people are true, but our role is to actually say, well, now, if we believe this to be true, how do we read Michael Jackson's music? How do we read Michael Jackson as a person? Because of this context. And I think this context is important and surrounds us. And my relationship to Michael Jackson has completely transformed because of this context.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it was powerful, and that's why I wanted to discuss it.
Yeah. Well, with that, this has been the only podcast about the film Leaving Neverland.
And if you have left Neverland like I think I have, you should email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod to discuss your flight.
Was it the turbulence? Shahir, when you are not coming back to the States full force after 3 joyous episodes of lighthearted film, I'll say, to come back down with a actual serious discussion, and one I am very glad we had. Where can folks find you?
You can find me at my website, www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. Matt, when you are not being dragged down by your favorite New Zealander to the depths of one-sided documentary filmmaking, where can people find you?
You can find me being incredibly fair and balanced at MATTHEWKROL.com for my life and works. Also Skeletor, the number 4, PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. You can also find some of my work over at Extra Credits on YouTube. We are doing some fun stuff. I believe we just released an episode on... we're concluding Bronze Age myth on Extra Mythology. We're doing the story of Gilgamesh. I don't know how familiar you are with that, Shahir.
I know the name Gilgamesh, but I'm thinking of, I know it from Asterix.
It's the oldest myth. And
was he on the Smurfs? Gilgamesh.
No, that's Gargamel.
Yeah, close.
But it's told in a very fun way. I please urge you to check it all out. It's I will call it bro-tastic.
Okay.
It's very, very fun. Also, we're doing, I think, Extra History just did one on the both the act and the trial of the Boston Massacre. So some interesting stuff over there. Next week, it's just going to be us, baby.
What are we going to be talking about?
Us, baby.
Oh.
You see what I did?
Yeah.
I am pumped for that.
Yeah.
We're going to see it this weekend. It's going to be dope. Well, actually, last weekend we'll have seen. You know how time works.
It's a flat circle.
No, it is not a flat circle. It is a linear, ever-splittering, multi-dimensional...
Can you do a Matthew McConaughey impression right now?
All right. All right. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.